Okay, good evening. I'm going to let our panelists who want to log back in, log back in. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's 6:45 and we have the Planning Commission is hosting this event this evening. And we have, I'm just going to say 37 attendees have dialed in. So this is, as my colleague just said, this is our first virtual online meeting. So we're going to go from here and see how this goes. It's exciting. We have hired a consultant team to help us leverage a commerce grant we received to look at promoting building in the downtown and housing. And we are looking at what we've done to date and where we're going from here. And so Bob Bingford from Makers is here, and I'm going to let him just take over and give the presentation. If you have any questions, he's going to go over the housekeeping for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann, and good evening, planning commissioners and Covington community members. I did want to add that Scott Bonjukian from Makers will be helping me out. We are the lead consultants of a consultant team, and also who will be joining me, Lisa Greeter is here. She's probably going to wave. I don't see her, but I'm sure she is. And we also have another consultant. I'll get to that in a minute here. But I did want to say a little bit about the agenda. So we're working on about 2-hour agenda here, and bear with us because if you were on for Ryan earlier, this is our first, Covington's first stab at a webinar like this, and I'm probably sure it's one of your first ones like this as well. So, but we have a lively presentation here and a survey. So first we're going to present some background information on the project to give you some context, and that's going to be about 20 minutes. And then we're going to get into some of the concepts for the code. And then we're going to have a survey with that. So we have about 12 or so questions that we want to ask you to evaluate. And that's going to take about 40 minutes. And then we're going to discuss the results. We'll be able to see immediately what the results are, which is kind of fun. And then we'll discuss them. What do we like or not like about them, and what questions we might have. And then we'll talk about next steps and adjourn, hopefully at about 8:45. So some housekeeping information here. The meeting is being recorded. And we have, the city's got a great webpage for the project shown on your screen here. So all the meeting materials here are going to be posted. We've given the city a reduced size PDF that they'll be able to post pretty immediately. And also a version of tonight's survey will be made available online, and we're working with staff to ideally get that up to speed tomorrow morning. The other item, questions, there's the Q&A and the raise hand buttons down below. Feel free to use the question, also for comments, and use that at any time. Our team will be kind of helping me with those. And later during the discussion, we're going to try to get through the presentation because we have a lot of material first. But during the discussion, we invite you, if you have a comment you want to say verbally, raise your hand. Otherwise, please use the question button to write down your comments of why you like or don't like it, or if you have a question, and that'll be really useful. So again, Covington staff has been great helping us out. You met Ann there, and Ryan kicked us off, and Jenna Estep also is heavily involved. Again, Makers, the lead consultant. Burke Consulting is joining us for SEPA expertise and the market analysis, and Lisa will talk about that. And also David Evans and Associates is doing some transportation planning, and Josh and Angela have been working with us. They're not here tonight, but they are collaborating. And Scott's going to talk a little bit about some overview slides here.
Great, thanks, Bob. Thanks everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Scott with Makers. I'm just going to run through a quick couple of slides here to get everyone oriented with downtown Covington. And first off, the map on the right here shows where it's actually located. It's the kind of the black outline there in the southwest part of the city. It's where City Hall is, along with Costco, Home Depot, and some of the other major commercial areas in Covington. The boundary that we're looking at today is approximately 422 acres, which represents about 10% of the city's land area. Next slide, please. So here's a little zoomed in view. The color coding here represents what the different properties in downtown are used for. So in red, you'll see representing commercial and retail and office uses represents about half of the downtown land area, which may not be surprising since that's where a lot of folks do their shopping. But the other half is a mix of housing, which is the more lighter yellow and orange colors, institutional uses, especially medical, of a couple of medical facilities in downtown, and also some open space and public utility uses make up the rest of downtown. Downtown's made up of 4 zones for regulation purposes, color-coded here as well. And the purpose of the zones is to allow varying different types of uses at different building heights and densities.
Nope.
Go to the next slide there. All right, thank you. So here's an area view of downtown to give you a sense of the size of the buildings and the natural environment. And also we have on here the parcel layer to show you the size of properties in downtown. And just to give a little more context, it generally stretches from Highway 18 on the west to Jenkins Creek and Wax Road to the south, and then from the BPA substation and up to Walmart. It also includes some parcels west of Highway 18 along 272nd Street, and it also goes east of Jenkins Creek and captures the Home Depot store. Next slide, please. So this project is taking a bit of a big picture, and we'll go over some of the background information here, the previous planning history. But what we're doing right now is evaluating changes to specific regulations that control the design and use of buildings and streets and public spaces in downtown. And ultimately, what this project will result in is what's called a form-based code, and that will help us more effectively implement the community's vision for a walkable, compact, and pedestrian-friendly community. And we'll go a little bit more into what form-based codes are and what the benefits are. And this project is funded and leveraging a grant received from the Washington State Department of Commerce as part of efforts to increase residential housing capacity. In 2010, Covington formally adopted its vision for downtown and did a downtown planning and zoning study that I'm sure folks on the Planning Commission and maybe we have some involved members of the public here who are familiar with that. At the same time, a new chapter of the municipal code was adopted that provided specific design and development standards for downtown. Since then, downtown's seen quite a bit of development and concerns have been raised both over the quantity and quality of that development. There's been some good examples and some not so good examples that folks have raised to us. So as part of this, we believe further work is going to be needed to streamline the code and make it more usable, both for the city staff who implement it and also the developers and builders who use the code to create projects. And our goals are to create a more human-scaled environment, build on the many plans for more streets and trails throughout the downtown area, create high-quality mixed-use development, and also, most importantly, perhaps, is to promote a wider variety of housing types and choices, ranging from apartments to townhouses and other types. So again, as I mentioned, this is the latest in several projects to plan for downtown. It started way back in the 1990s when Covington was incorporated in '97, and the first vision plan was established. In 2010, there was that in-depth downtown plan and zoning study I mentioned. In 2016, the city studied options for a private public civic campus in the town center that would help bring some of those downtown elements together. And today we are building on all of these previous efforts. So here's a map of some of the most major projects from the past 5 years, just to give an example of what's gone in. You can see a variety of residential and commercial, both retail and other self-storage and other types of buildings have gone in. And looking at all these projects provide a great example of projects that were built under the current regulations for zoning and design standards, and we can assess these projects to see how they're doing. And more development is on the way. Covington is a pretty popular place, we're finding, and there's continued interest in building here. In particular, there's a couple of large residential projects planned along with more commercial developments. And these pictures here are some examples of in-progress developments that will be coming online in the next couple of years. So our desired outcomes for this project are to again, create a new form-based code that supports the vision for downtown and really help build the city that the community has been desiring for ever since it was incorporated. We also plan, as part of the grant project, we will be providing a new code section that exempts certain types of downtown construction from environmental review. And Lisa will get more into the specifics of how that works under state law. And finally, we'll also incorporate recommendations for infrastructure improvements with the biggest emphasis on transportation that's going to be needed to support new growth and development in downtown. So a form-based code is it's a code structure that addresses the relationship between buildings and streets and public space more so than a traditional or conventional zoning code would. And form-based codes address important design areas such as streets and sidewalks, landscape, and other public spaces that a traditional zoning code oftentimes will not get into. Form-based codes are often very graphic oriented with a lot of graphic examples and pictures and charts. This is an example from one of the first form-based codes adopted in Washington State down in Clark County along the Highway 99 area. So wrapping up our project background here, this is what we're calling the original project schedule. There have definitely been some adjustments made due to COVID-19. For example, this meeting was originally going to be in the spring, but we are definitely keeping on pace to present a draft and get to the City Council in spring of 2021, which was our original due date. Our next step after tonight is to take all of the feedback we've gotten so far from the public and other stakeholders and develop a first draft code. And then we'll present that draft code and other materials at another public meeting either around or after the holidays this winter. So I'll turn it over to Lisa, who will talk about the existing conditions report that her team developed along with a market study.
Thanks, Scott. So the other component for the grant is to develop an environmental impact statement that takes an area-wide look at the downtown. And it is promoting a tool that is optional for the city, but it would be an infill exemption, which would encourage residential and mixed-use development. So the State Environmental Policy Act is meant to provide information on the natural and built environment before there's an approval of permits or even plans like in codes, like the form-based code. And it's an informational document that is meant to present information about options and alternatives and how well they meet objectives. I apologize for the phone. So the infill exemption, as I mentioned, is designed to promote residential mixed-use development in areas that may not be fully meeting the goals of a comprehensive plan, and for development that is consistent with the vision and the plan in the code. would be allowed. The exemption, however, does not apply to lands covered by water or wetlands. So the areas right along Jenkins Creek would not get the fast track permitting, but vast majority of the downtown would. We had a scoping process a couple months back and put the notice on the project website and sent it out to agencies and published it. That helped us identify some potential topics. We're anticipating we'll look at surface water and stormwater, land use and aesthetics, socioeconomics, transportation, utilities, and public services. The meeting tonight is meant to help us identify some of those land use and code provisions that will form the basis for an alternative that we'll evaluate in the EIS. So as part of developing the EIS, we've been working on an existing conditions report. When complete, it will be posted to the city's website, but we're just giving you some initial highlights. So in terms of land use and aesthetics, the vision for a mixed-use center has been well established. There's goals for a walkable character that have partially been implemented. There's still a lot of large parcels adjacent to some smaller single-family lots at the edge. Jenkins Creek is a shoreline of the state. It has wetlands and floodplains associated with it, and it is something that affects the development along there. And the city has been also acquiring land along it. Socioeconomics, the downtown population has grown quite a bit by 69% over the last 10 years, but it is still just 12% of the city's overall population. The downtown has a higher share of Hispanic residents than the city as a whole, but overall the city is slightly more diverse than downtown. There are some senior housing developments, and so the population is slightly older than the city as a whole and has a slightly lower income. The Puget Sound Regional Council has published an opportunity index map that indicates that right now downtown has a low opportunity for positive life outcomes because of the quality of existing housing. One aspect that is noted as a highly positive feature is the open space elements, such as along the creek and the wetlands. There's some opportunities to offer housing variety in this area. Go to the next slide. In terms of transportation, as you all know, downtown is traversed by 272nd, but the overall parcel and street configurations hinder a park once and walk kind of dynamic to get people walking from their car throughout the area. There were several elements in the 2009 plan that Bob will cover in more detail, but it did talk about breaking down those blocks and identified some priorities, and those are still valid, but there's additional improvements to be made that Bob will cover. The area is well served by water and sewer infrastructure. The city has strict stormwater standards that promote low impact development. There is a wellhead protection area, that's that lower map with the green and the red, and so uses that have hazardous materials are limited in downtown. But in general, the systems are in place to ensure quality development, and the water and sewer systems are designed for the higher intensity uses. The area is well served with public services. The police department addresses this area because it is the focal point for commercial activity. It is also a focal point for calls for service. So the plan and code can address things like crime prevention through environmental design. There are 2 fire stations that serve the area. The Kent School District serves the area, and even though Covington Elementary moved out of the area, there are several elementary schools that serve the area. Covington did purchase the Covington Elementary School for civic purposes. It's not been designed to date, and Bob will go over some ideas for that area. And the city's purchased some land for the SoCo Park. This map on the right is showing a number of planned trails throughout the area. Some of my colleagues have worked on a market study. The land use in the study area is heavily weighted towards commercial activity, particularly retail. As on the whole, the Covington residential property across the city, the values are higher than many of the persons that work in the downtown could afford. And overall, there are limited opportunities for quality multifamily. The rental rates for office, retail, and multifamily are comparable to countywide averages, and there's room for growth in rates for multifamily. One of the things that I'm sure you're aware of is over time, retail centers have been shifting as people shop more online. And so there's been a trend that has been shaping the size and offerings for commercial uses. And the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to accelerate those trends. Like many other centers, Covington downtown is well positioned to explore opportunities for mixed use development, housing, civic uses to create that quality pedestrian oriented environment that overall should help ensure a healthier economic condition.
Thank you, Lisa. So I want to give a few more slides of background information before we get into the actual concept and the survey. And we've mentioned the 2010 plan quite a bit. This is the key concept map that came out of it. And I'd say largely that it still seems to be the direction that folks want to go in terms of creating a more pedestrian environment. And you can see that the star asterisk is generally south of 272nd, about where the elementary school site is. And of course, you could see that Jenkins Creek, it makes a big deal of that and improving connectivity. So I think we're still heading in that direction. It's just a matter of refining the details of the code. And so that's what we've been diving into. To the left is a screenshot of the cover page for the chapter 1831 in code, which are the downtown zoning and design standards. And then there's the actual design guideline document. I will say that we will be, right now, the downtown design standards and guidelines are a separate freestanding document, but our plan is to integrate those. We're going to update that and integrate it into the municipal code. So it's all in one spot. I did want to say, right now, the downtown code allows for 4 to 7 story buildings in much of downtown, and largely we're not really changing capacity. We're sort of changing some of the design details. So we're not really messing with the height for the most part. There might be some small adjustment details in there, but largely it's the same. And then of course we did an audit of the entire code, and for the most part, I think it's pretty good, but it's a matter of details. And I think one of the things we noticed was there's a lot of open-ended flexibility, which is a challenge for staff, and it creates some unpredictability. Again, the intent and direction of the code is good, but we're looking at probably quite a bit of refinements here and there to make it more effective. And then one key thing that I'll talk about is in the town center zone, there's this requirement that requires ground floor commercial on all streets, which we think is not really realistic, especially given the internet, retail, and even more now with COVID-19 impacts to commercial retail use. So we've interviewed 18 downtown stakeholders so far to give us another look and thought as to what's working and what's not. And these 4 bullet points are just some of the summary comments. And what we heard is, really we have everything we need, but maybe not much of what we want in terms of social, cultural amenities, parks, lively restaurants, and Highway 516, 272nd is a big barrier, of course. There's a lack of cohesive community design and a concern about competition with Lake Point coming in down the road. and a desire to make a more welcoming downtown for all, with a kind of a balance of homes, amenities, and a gathering space. So that gets us into the concepts, and we've got some fun material here. Scott will explain how this works.
Great, thanks, Bob. So we're going to run through about 12 survey questions tonight over the next 30 or 40 minutes. Just a few housekeeping notes about the survey and how it works. Your answers will be anonymous, so don't worry about being tagged to any of the answers. A note that if you are watching tonight's presentation on a phone or a tablet, you can still do the survey, but it just might be a little bit tricky with the way the interface works on a small screen. And if you have an opportunity to switch to a laptop or a desktop computer, you might want to think about that. Questions will appear in a pop-up box on your Zoom screen. An example shown here on the right side. And each pop-up box will only have one question at a time. You'll just choose of your answer among 5 choices, and you have to you have to click the submit button to have your answer recorded. And then you can close out or click the X button to close that pop-up window. And as Bob mentioned, the agenda later tonight, we'll go back through each survey question and review the answers together as part of our discussion period. Now, just for fun and to make sure everyone is familiar with the controls, I'm going to go ahead and launch our practice question here. Let's see here. So it should be coming up in a few seconds here. So you should see a pop-up box, and feel free to drag it around if you need to be able to see the PowerPoint slide behind that. The concept here we're asking about is the branding for Seattle's new hockey team, which was announced a few weeks ago. Is it a winner or a loser? Rated between 5 and 1, 5 being great, 1 being very bad. And make sure you click the submit button so your answer is recorded. Let's see, I believe we have 57 or 60 folks that are eligible to vote tonight. So I'll aim for getting that many in. Give it a few more seconds here. All right, 56 people have voted, so I'll go ahead and end polling. And I will, as an example, I'll share what the results look like. Okay, so pretty favorable. People are on board with the branding and marketing. So whoever came up with that should get a bonus. All right, and I will go ahead and close that, and Bob will take it from here.
Okay, thank you, folks. Great participation on this. Here's the first item, so that we're starting right off the bat talking about the town center core, and that's the elementary school site. So the idea that with this effort, we're looking at really building off of that concept and the vision from the 2010 plan, providing more guidance on the next steps in redeveloping the school site. So, and there's a lot of good examples that have been built in the last 10 years that we can learn from. And I will note that there's going to be some later survey questions that get into some details, but this question is kind of just about the larger concept, and are we still moving in the right direction? Trying to advance my slide here. There we go. So here's question number 1. The city will plan for and initiate the development of a vibrant civic and mixed-use campus on the old elementary school site. What do you think this concept? So again, you're voting 1 through 5, 5 being best, 5 is a great idea, very high priority, 3 is neutral, 1 is a very bad idea. So it looks like we've got it looks like you're up to speed already and everybody's voting. I'll pause here until we get to about the 54-ish, and we're almost there. Okay, we got 53, 54. Oh, now we have even more. So more folks have joined in. That's great. We got 50.
Just to clarify, staff confirm, I do believe both the public and planning commission are invited to vote here.
All
Yes.
right.
You're
50 years.
correct on that. The planning commissioners should be able to vote as panelists.
Okay, this is impressive. All right, well, I'm gonna keep going here. And again, we're gonna get a chance to go over those results and show you the polling results later and to talk about it. So the next topic is dealing with downtown circulation. And the participants so far have, again, acknowledged some of the shortcomings of the circulation for cars, pedestrians, bikes, and transit. The lack of through streets makes it difficult to get around. And 272nd has a lot of traffic here. So again, there's a lot of stuff that we're just building on. The existing code already recognizes this, and we're kind of refining things. So the one thing that we're doing is identifying some strategic high priority street and trail connections that can be implemented with private development or city initiated improvements. And for some areas, we're also looking at a maximum block size standard if the current developments redevelop in more intensity. And then of course, we're refining the streetscape standards, meaning the sidewalk widths and planting strip widths, if and when new development and redevelopment happens. So this is a map that, essentially it's our refined version of the existing plan. And I'll have a zoom in a second here, but the black are the planned new street connections. And then the yellow dots are trail connections. And we've kind of built on, again, some of the stuff that's in the current code. And zooming in a little bit, here you can see the, I guess if you can see my scrolling area, we got the school site down here. And so you can see trying to get some new streets there. And expanding on the connections. If the Safeway shopping center redevelops, we would complete a more complete grid there and extend this connection up here north of 272nd. And you can see a lot of these trail connections. You can see the Jenkins Creek Trail, the new SoCo Park, and trying to make connections off of Wax Road to it. And as an example, our firm worked on a plan for Kirkland's Juanita many, many years ago. And to the left is an old aerial from 1990. And they did a plan just like we're doing here and a code. And they required new connections in the middle. And so to the right there is the after and what exists now. It took a while for this to happen, but now you see in the red are the street vehicle and ped connections. And in the orange are pedestrian connections. And here's an example of those new street connections that are now there. The other part of this is, again, reviewing street standards. And so you can see an example of we're looking at all the streets and trying to get the right cross sections for planting strip widths and sidewalks to really make sure that we're accommodating these future 4 to 7 story buildings and trying to make it pedestrian friendly and welcoming. So question 2 is enhancing downtown circulation network, building on the current code materials to make pedestrian routes better, bike systems, car connections as properties develop or redevelop. What do you think of this concept? All right.
I'm unclear. This is, are you talking about the concept you presented or just the general idea of doing this?
The general idea of doing it, the details will, there's some details coming up in the later questions. Good question though. And by the way, I saw some hands raised by other folks. Again, we're gonna try to get through this presentation because there's a lot. If you have any urgent things regarding the presentation, I would say use the question tool and ask the questions, and the team can interrupt if there's any urgent matter. Otherwise, there'll be plenty of chance to comment
Bob, I think one question was for you to go back to show the close-up to the connections.
Okay, here's one of the zoom ins. And in fact, we're gonna get into this a little bit in some of the later questions. So I wouldn't, this is kind of the overall concept. And there's still room for refinement of this. A lot of these are the same as the current code. Some of them are new. Okay, we have, do we have about all of them here? I think, okay.
Yeah, we're good. Go ahead and move on to next section.
All right, thank you, folks. Okay, the next topic is block frontages. So essentially the private development that fronts on streets. And so this is the Polaris development here. And probably many of you have never seen this because it's really hidden behind Safeway that's in your distance to the left. So pointing out some issues with the current situation. Again, right now in the town center zone, it requires all block frontages along all the streets to have ground floor commercial. And that's, given what we've worked with other communities, that's really an unrealistic expectation that really should be adjusted. And then the current standards are, I think they're good, but they don't quite hit all of the design issues. And of course, things have adjusted since in the past 10 years here. So what we're really looking at is replacing the current standards with this block frontage concept, which I'll go through in the next couple slides here. And so this is the approach. If you can see the screen now, there's a map on your right. Really what this is doing is looking at downtown on a block by block basis and designating different standards, recognizing the different contexts and opportunities and constraints with each block. So I'm going to go through these. So storefront block frontages would be those few areas where you want to require storefronts on the sidewalks and have ground level commercial uses in those spaces and make it required. So this is the most strict of all of those. Again, for the most part, this is required now on all of those streets, but this adds a few extra details. This next designation here is landscape block frontages. And this would be areas where you actually require a landscape setback. So you can see the sketch on the left and the images on the right with some of the features that would be required there. So kind of a softer environment, more bleeding into your residential areas. And then we have what these called mixed block frontages in the purple. And those are optional. You could do a storefront or a landscape setback. So those would be the developer choice. Basically whatever the market bears and what they feel is going to work. What's important also is identifying what wouldn't be consistent with code. And so the left example is like a multifamily building that's within 1 feet of the sidewalk, which we don't think works very well for obvious privacy reasons. The version on the right is in Seattle, and it's just a big blank wall that degrades the pedestrian environment and it invites graffiti too. So why do it this way? This is an approach that we've used for quite a long time, and the reason we like it is it recognizes that not all streets are the same. For example, 272nd warrants a lot different approach than some of the smaller internal streets. And then you can really tailor this thing to be as strict or as loose as you desire and what will fit the situation. And it's adaptable over time. If you want to change a designation, you can do that. And like I said, it's been successful in other locations that we've utilized this approach. So getting into the next question here, we'll focus on this area north of 272nd and Highway 516, the roundabout by Coles. And that is an area we feel is an opportunity. And if it's redeveloped, you got Coles up there in the northwest corner, and you have some single family homes there that are zoned for downtown that could be redeveloped. And so this is an area around the roundabout where we might look at requiring storefronts around the roundabout and really try to make that a pedestrian focal point of that part of downtown. And then have it be more optional in other areas. And so these sketches here in the next slides, you can see a roundabout and a sort of a storefront / office building. And then there's kind of, mixed use type of buildings on your left. So that would be kind of the concept. And this would be, this would be choice of the property owners. If and when they want to redevelop, then an approach or design like this would be required. But they can choose to stay the way they want for the time being. It's pretty much their choice. But when they do want to redevelop, then this code here would require them to go this route. So question 3 then is the question. So should we foster development of a pedestrian-friendly mixed-use node centered on the roundabout there? What do you think of this concept? Good or bad? Neutral? All right, we're almost done here. 54. 59. I think we're 60. Okay. I think we're about set there. Thank you, folks. All right, we're going to keep going. The next is just heading south a little bit to 272nd. Streets block frontages. Right now you have this section that you can see from Google Earth on the right shows sort of the standard right now with a 8-foot sidewalk and a 5.5-foot planting strip, which is the rough sketch there. And the code also requires building, new building walls. So like the building on the right there meets the standards and has some minimum windows and weather protection requirements. So really the updated concept is just refining that and strengthening it just a little bit. But what we're looking at is maybe widening the planting strip there because of the heavy traffic. So maybe widening that planting strip from 5 to 12 feet to provide more trees and make it a little bit more inviting to pedestrians over time. And so again, this would be as properties redevelop or if the city were to initiate a stretch of improvements along part of it, they would build to this standard. So, and the next part here looks at the actual, the frontages. And so looking at there is really focusing on the intersections and making sure that the buildings are up closer to the street at the intersections, but adding a little bit more flexibility between the intersections, recognizing that, you're not going to get storefronts all along 272nd. So this would be the map. The building on the lower left there kind of would be an example of being built up close to the street, and your parking's obviously behind it. And this next image here is kind of the aspirational concept. So you can see again, this is a development in I think it's Hillsboro, Oregon, where it shows, picture 272nd, the street at the bottom, and so your pedestrian-oriented development tees off of that and creates a more quieter pedestrian environment. And then you have much of your parking is kind of on 272nd, but it creates these nice gateways at the intersections. So that's really the concept there. It just means we're doing now in the code a little bit, strengthening it. So enhance the character, wider planting strips, pedestrian friendly. All right, we're
I think if it wasn't mentioned before, we'll generally try to allow about 30 seconds for voting just so we can keep the momentum up here.
okay. And hopefully my internet connection's gonna hold. I'm getting some flashes on my screen, but it's still going. Okay. I think we're good here. All right, we're gonna keep going. The next topic, there's a couple of single family subdivisions in the downtown area that are circled here in yellow, and they're zoned MHO, mixed housing office. And this zoning, it allows these uses to continue, obviously, but it encourages consolidation of those lots. However, based on our experience in working in a lot of towns, suburban or more urban than Covington, it's really, really hard, especially for established, stable subdivisions to consolidate in transition into commercial uses. And especially in this context, we've been working in areas where you have subdivisions close to light rail stations, and those are obviously a whole different story. But even and it took downtown Bellevue had some single family homes. It took decades to read. So we're very skeptical that these uses would change over and be consolidated in the next 20 years. And so here's just some overview pictures. Off the top of my head, I think one of them is called the Township. Maybe Ann can correct me on the name of these subdivisions. This is the one next to Walmart in the north along 176th and south. And these to me look like pretty stable subdivisions. And here's some street views of both. Oh, I skipped ahead here. So what I would say the conclusion is, oftentimes we find that this type of zoning can sometimes act to discourage investment in these areas, and it kind of labels them transitional, and that can have a kind of a negative effect on them for the longevity and just for investment in them. So we kind of questioned that, and we've had some good discussion with staff. And so one concept is to ask you is maybe should we take these out of the downtown area and rezone them consistent with their use and not pressure them to redevelop, because you have so many other properties that are easier to redevelop. So this is our question to you: is should we consider removing these out of the downtown, out of the downtown boundary? It'll be good too if we have any if you're a resident actually in these subdivisions, please note in the questions if you are, because we'd obviously want to hear from those folks. All right, we're about done here. We got 58. Okay, we got a few more to go here, and the next concept looks at Jenkins Creek in the Wax Road area. So this is we feel is a big opportunity in your downtown. You got the creek and the forest, nice environmental benefits. The city has already planned a recreational trail and bought that land for Soco Park right around just north of where it says Wax Road on the map. And really adjacent development could complement and connect the trail. So here's just some visuals of the current situation. And there's a couple of the development applications are in this corridor already. So I think folks are recognizing this opportunity. There's some environmental constraints naturally because the creek is there. There's some wetlands, and the code requires a pretty generous setback. So it kind of limits the buildable area in that corridor. But we may look at tweaking what the height and the intensity of development are, and maybe adjusting that and allowing more because there's so little that you can build on there. So these were I looked for some photos of other kind of examples that can kind of share what the concept might be. So, picture these where you have developments that really build a trail with the development and really use as a huge amenity. I don't know if it's going to be hard surfaced or soft surface, but again, these hopefully give you an idea of the type of opportunity here. So the question is, really, this is kind of refining what's already here and making it a priority for investment. So let us know what you think. Almost done. It's impressive we haven't lost too many yet. Okay. Okay, the next area we'll talk about is south of 272nd, the shopping centers. You got Safeway here and LA Fitness to the right here with the circle feature. Big parking area. Who knows what's going to happen long-term with those. But again, right now, most of this is zoned town center. And if it redevelops, it would require some of these new connections. But all of those connections along the street would be required to have ground floor commercial on them. And we think that kind of loosening up that requirement and being a little bit more strategic about it. So here you can see that we would sort of limit where you would require storefronts and allow options on some of these other connections. I'm going to end to the right there. Again, I showed that example earlier. So that's kind of the graphic on the right of the photo aerial is kind of an example of what a concept could be if and when they would ever redevelop. I think that's the last one there. So, so that's the question is, what do you think of this concept? Again, it's continuing to encourage the shopping centers to transition to a more pedestrian-friendly environment over the long term, while allowing a little bit more flexibility. So I think that we'll probably end up going a little longer than we projected on the presentation, but we have some flex time there, so I think we'll be okay. All right, we got 54. All right, we're gonna keep going. All right, now we'll get in back to the school center concept. We got a bunch of slides here. So we have two concepts we wanted to run by you, or the two approaches. One of them is more of an urban town center approach that has more private and multiple public gathering places. And the other is more of a civic campus with facilities and a large civic plaza for public gatherings. So this first one, the town center, would create a main street with storefronts, have, again, multiple gathering spaces. I'm going to keep going here because I got graphics to show you, but there's three really good examples in the region of this. One of them is in Woodinville. This is under construction right now. It's called the Schoolhouse District, and it's where the old Woodinville Schoolhouse is in this old brick building here, and then it used to be the city hall. And forever they tried to do something with this project, and they finally got a really good developer that they're doing this partnership on. And this is the site plan, and to the right of the images. And so what you're ending up with is they're preserving this old brick schoolhouse. They're integrating some public gathering spaces, and then a lot of it is like 5-story apartment buildings that add a lot of units. And here you can see a lot of pedestrian corridors. So I'd say that's a really good example. This next one is in Newcastle. And this is all private actually, but it's on the redevelopment of an old Mutual Materials brick plant. And the city had a plan and a code, and they did a development consistent with that. And there's sort of a 1-block main street. Actually, it's been extended since this picture because I was there last week. But you can see it's got like 5-story buildings with a main street, wide sidewalks, and you can see this parking garage. And what I've done here is I've integrated it next to over the school site at about the same scale to show that something like this would fit. And there's a kind of a green space, some open spaces integrated as well. The third example is Kirkland's downtown, and this is Park Place, which recently upgraded. And this is simply just a street with it has this redeveloped 6-story building here, but the scale of it pretty much matches. Again, you could have like a nice 1-block stretch of Main Street that would fit on this site. So this would be the concept of the block frontages. So this is the Polaris, the new multifamily 5-story development. Wax Road is right here. And so this would have a storefront designation, and then these other mixed designations. And these are examples of building locations of private development. And in the yellow would be trail connections that would connect with Soko Park and to Wax Road. And this is a really quick massing model that shows some buildings and maybe a roundabout. This is Wax Road. And here would be kind of your main with some plaza, corner, alleys behind the building, some parking garages with stoop and multi-family around them. And your medical complex would be back here, and the Polaris 5-story development would be to the right here. And then this also includes like a pedestrian corridor through it. And again, this is just a really quick sketch kind of showing this pedestrian corridor, and some photos here really try to show examples of what we were thinking with this concept. Again, a Main Street concept with lively restaurants, these pedestrian connections at the bottom, those would be examples with multifamily and condos fronting on them. So the second concept is quite a bit different. It would be, again, a large public space, and I'm just going to flip to the example here. So the best.
Can I interrupt you? Your audio is cutting out a little bit, so maybe try switching to your phone. Keep your screen up on your computer, but mute your.
Can someone switch me or make me?
I think if you can continue to use your laptop, just mute your mic there and use your phone for audio. Let's see, I think, let's see, Ryan, do we need to, I think, Bob, you need to unmute yourself on the phone, it looks like. Okay, well, maybe if that's not going to work, maybe go ahead and switch back to the computer then, and we'll carry on. It wasn't too bad, but I felt like it was degrading a little bit.
Okay, worst case scenario, Scott takes over. You can take over for me.
Sorry for your interruption there, folks.
No worries, no worries. So Sammamish Commons is a great example of this, and this is about the scale. You can see they have a city hall. They've got a big common space where they have their 4th of July celebrations and their farmers market, and a big library with a green roof there. So that's a good example. And then, of course, in the 2010 plan, this concept. So you see it's got a bunch of civic buildings there in a large space, and a little bit of room left over for some other buildings. In fact, this 2016 city study shows another iteration of this concept, and it shows a hotel with an entertainment venue, a city hall, a mixed retail, future police department, and a parking structure. So it has less, it would have less, obviously, this one wouldn't have any residential development, for instance, and it's more civic. I'm gonna keep going here. So, okay, again, here's another image of that. And on the left there is the Polaris existing development. So this is looking to the southeast towards Wax Road. Wax Road being about right here, if you could see my scroller. And this would be the concept would be kind of similar, but again, there's a lot more civic space, and maybe you still try to end up with a sort of a main street connection here. And here's Wax Road, and some trail connections again to Jenkins Creek. So again, your two concepts. The urban town center has a lot more private development. So it's again got the shorter main street, but a lot more residential units, restaurants, retail, and private activity. It may have some more limited public facilities, vertically oriented. It would obviously be less money because there'd be more private development, but there would need to be, I believe with the agreement, there would need to be some public facilities in there. And then the Civic campus would be, again, less private development, still includes a storefront, multiple public facilities, and probably a bit more money cost than the first option. So we wanted to ask, you know, and you don't have to choose between those. You can like both or you can dislike both. But this 8 is asking you about the first town center concept and what you think about that. Again, it's the main street, multiple gathering spaces, apartments above shops, structured parking, and integrated also community space. Both of these trying to create something that doesn't exist at all right now. We're almost done here. All right, I think we could probably 4:54, we can close out. All right, and then question 9 is the Civic concept. So Civic campus, what do you think of that? Okay. Now we got more people voting now. I think some people have been hiding. Okay. All right, we're going to try to move on quickly for the last few so we can get to the discussion and see your answers. Wanted to talk about open space for multifamily. Right now, downtown doesn't have any requirements for internal open space for apartments, which is a concern. So we want to add some. So we're looking at providing an amount of space requirement depending on the mix of unit types. The bigger the units, a little bit more open space per unit. And then we would have the lower right there, you see an example, try to get a variety of open spaces. And so really prioritizing publicly accessible outdoor spaces and common outdoor spaces, but still allowing and encouraging private ground level spaces and even common indoor rec spaces. And then ultimately providing good standards for the design of those spaces. So here's these are just examples from another one of our design standards documents showing desirable examples of common or shared open space, or roof deck examples, or common indoor, making sure that those are efficient shared spaces and not just simply rented, unrented units used as space. So this is just trying to illustrate that we're sharing a lot of research with the Planning Commission and diving into the real details of it, but I won't bore you with those. So the question is here is, what do you think? Updating the standards to integrate open space requirements to enhance the quality of these projects. Okay, we're almost done here. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. All right, a couple building design standards. So building scale and massing, I would say right now your design standards, in some ways they purposely avoid prescriptive standards, but that it might provide too much flexibility, which can be difficult to administer. And so our goal is to create a little bit more clarity on that, and I'll go into these details here. So one of them is to provide facade articulation standards for particularly your ground floor and also for multifamily. So what we like to do is say, okay, about every 40 feet, provide some features to articulate your facade, to break it down into smaller pieces and add visual interest. So we usually say, here's a list of desirable features, do at least 3 of those every 40 feet. And this graphic tries to illustrate an example. This allows the developer choices in what they can and how they can meet the standard. Another thing is for really large buildings, you need to do something bigger to break it up. So if your building's more than 120 feet, you might need to do more substantial modulation of the facade to break it up a little bit. And the Polaris building is kind of an example where it's got a lot of these little things, but it kind of goes on forever. So some can argue that maybe some other feature or changes, more significant changes might have helped it. So this building's kind of a conceptual example. It's got this white piece that stands out and breaks up the 2 sides of the facade. So the standards we're looking at would try to be a little more forceful at requiring something, not necessarily this, but something to visually break it up a little more. So 11 is, what do you think of those concepts? Add detailed building scale and massing standards, a little bit more clear than what exists now. 2 more questions, 1 or 2. I think there's just 1.
Just 1.
All right. We previously had 2, but we didn't want to end with 13 questions. So, all right, I think we're about there. Okay. The last one is facade materials. This is a big deal and something that we like providing good guidance on, especially for some of the commonly used materials. So materials like synthetic stucco, which is sometimes your EIFS if you're in the industry, or exterior insulation finishing system is a technical name. So the left an example that you don't want to have, where you have this giant facade which uses this and it's not well detailed and it uses all the same color. So to the right is a better example where it's integrated with other materials and it's got better detailing. So it's a material that's very efficiently cost-wise, so you might want to allow it, but just providing some conditions on it. And likewise, concrete block is another one. It's relatively inexpensive compared to some other materials. But when you use it, especially for large areas, we suggest usually to integrate a variety of textures and colors, of which these buildings did a really good job of. The building on the left uses split face and smooth face, uses different colors that are really tied into the articulation of the storefronts. And metal siding is a similar one. So you can see the same thing where to the right's just using the same color over a big, huge area. To the one on the left mixes it up a little bit more. And the last one is cement board, or many of you know it as hardy panel or hardy boards. And hardy, you probably see this material. In fact, I think Polaris is mostly cement board, and it's a very efficient material. I actually have it on my house because there's so much you can do with it. But again, it's good to have some conditions. And so maybe you don't want to have it be the version on the right where it's the same color, big area, mix it up a little bit like the version on the left. So again, adding some specific conditions for use of these materials, still allowing them, but just having some conditions. Okay, we're almost ready. All right. Great job. I'm going to scroll all the way back now. Let me see what. So now we're going to discuss these and go see the results. So I'm going to see if I could just go backwards here. Bear with me. A lot of slides. Oh, I went too far. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, the first one was that Heart of Covington Town Center. What do you think of the overall concept? And I think you can see, you should be able to all see the results now. So 42% said top, great, top priority, and 38, so 80% gave it a 4 or 5. So obviously we'll just keep going on this.
We've got a, Rob, so again, folks, this is we'll go ahead and start with the discussion part here. I see we have one person raising a hand who wants to ask a verbal comment. So I'll go ahead and allow that person to talk. And just the FYI, we know there's a few other unanswered questions in the chat. And as we get to the relevant sections, we'll try to bring up questions. For example, I know there's a few about transportation. Oh, okay. Actually, the person who had a raised hand is not there anymore. Okay, never mind. Go ahead and move on, Bob.
Okay, great. Let's see. Downtown circulation concept was the second one, and streetscape improvements. Let's see what we got here. All right, 54% gave it a 5. 31%, again, high support to kind of continue to do what we're doing and strengthen them. Any hands raised or comments here?
Yeah, we had a few questions about transportation. Let's see if I can go back and find those. There was and these might be questions for our transportation consultant that we can pass on, but for example, there's one that says, will traffic that is diverted from will traffic that's diverted to side streets be addressed? For example, 256 is a common road to bypass downtown traffic. And maybe, I don't know if Bob or Lisa wants to tackle some of these kind of infrastructure questions.
Maybe I had to go to the map. What was the street, Scott?
256 was mentioned specifically.
Okay. Well, I think we might have to, what we're going to do is share these comments with Josh and Angela, our transportation consultants, but we are addressing those and we're looking at the whole system. So yes, that's something that we're looking at and trying to make sure that we have a safe, efficient, and multimodal system. If staff has any other words of wisdom beyond that, please chime in. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
I had a related question about increase of traffic going from the 10 Trails Community Black Diamond development. I think it's probably safe to say that's a little bit outside of kind of the downtown scope. And I'm not sure if staff have been coordinating with the county or other local jurisdictions on managing from other jurisdictions.
I'm going to butt in, but I'll certainly pass these comments along to our Public Works department. And Lisa Greeter, interrupt me if I say something wrong. My understanding as a non-transportation person is that the Public Works has traffic models and they plan for future street improvements. And that is based on knowing what the traffic model is saying, and things that go into that traffic model include development outside of our city. And I also know that when 10 Trails was constructed, there was a SEPA that went into effect, and we did comment and get mitigation at that time to get funding to do improvements to our road system based on impacts from the development that is and will be occurring in 10 Trails. So we're looking at that all the time, but I'm not the right person to answer that in detail.
Okay, thanks, Ann. I'll point out another question here. We had with regard to pedestrian and walkability, have we consulted with disabled or elderly community members since they're a key stakeholder? Yes, we did interview one or two folks who identified themselves as senior citizens and who live in downtown, and they did provide us some good feedback on the way downtown works and doesn't work for walking around right now. And that'll be the specific pedestrian infrastructure will be looked at, and we'll make some recommendations on it moving forward.
Okay. Are we ready to move on, Scott?
Yeah, I don't think I see any other specific circulation issues right now. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay, the next one is the roundabout by Coles, foster pedestrian-friendly development. Okay, so you see here, we got 32% of 5, 37% 4. So largely, almost 70% gave it a very strong score. So it looks like we have some pretty strong support. No one said very bad idea. A couple, 6 gave it a not great. Okay, any comments or raised hands on this one?
Not that I see so far.
Okay, we got plenty of other questions, so I'm going to keep going. The next one's 272nd. And continuing to, we're actually requiring wider landscape strips. So it looks like we got a lot of support for that too. 70% gave it a 4 or 5. We had a couple that really didn't like it, 3 that really didn't like it, and 6 was not a great. So we've got 16% gave it a negative ranking. I will say that because this requires more improvements, so when property redevelops, it does take a little bit more land and requires some easements there on the ground floor. And typically what the communities do is allow the second floors to cantilever out over, at least in this case, to cantilever a couple feet over the sidewalk to sort of make up for that difference. Okay, any comments on this? Should I keep going?
Yeah, go ahead and move forward.
Okay, the 5th one is on the single family areas within downtown and whether we should consider moving those out of downtown. Okay, so this one a little more mixed. We got a 21% of 5, 26% of 4. So we get, that's almost 47% gave it a positive score. Well, naturally a lot of people, about a third are neutral. And we've got about a quarter gave it a negative view. So it's, you know, definitely more stronger than negative, but not a 100% consensus. So I think we'll continue to talk about this is what this certainly says. And so it looks like we got a hand raised. Tom?
I'll go ahead and open up Tom there. Tom, I think you might have to unmute yourself after I give you permission here.
You got me now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I want to know about also the single family homes that's in the town center area. Why wouldn't you remove those from the town center area if you're going to remove the other homes from the MHO zones?
That's a very...
Oh, go ahead, Bob. I was just going to, I'm sorry. I was assuming, Tom, you're talking about kind of on the east side of Rax Road. There's a string of MHO zone single family property.
Well, they're single family homes, but they're zoned town center, which I happen to be in one of those. I'm curious if you're going to remove the other places, why not? That's just a very small little section there.
On 278th Place?
Yes.
Well, that's a good comment. And we only,
They're not going to change over to commercial very quickly.
and that's an option. And certainly, you know, the one reason at least we didn't think of including it is because it is smaller. It's just one cul-de-sac. And that's the same for, there's another block up by Walmart, which is zoned MC. If you could see my scroller that I didn't bring in too. And
I
also it's a
see it.
different subdivision, but those, you know, if we hear from more folks who have an interest in keeping it, I think that the city will listen. So,
Okay.
good comment. We'll make note of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Should I keep going, Scott?
1 second, bear with me. I think. Yeah, I think you can go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay. Jenkins Creek and Wax Road. So the concept here again is continue to prioritize the trail and development to complement. So very much support on this. 37% gave it a 5. So we've got 61% positive, 26% neutral, and 13% negative. So strong, pretty strong, not 100% consensus, but pretty darn strong support there. Any written comments on this one?
Yeah, I can't find it exactly, but I saw it a few minutes ago. It was about, you know, one reason folks move to Covington is for the natural environment and the wetlands and the trees.
Okay.
So what's being done to preserve those, I suppose, both along Jenkins Creek and elsewhere, there's stands of trees.
Yeah, and again, the as we mentioned there, the wetland and buffer requirements there are going to require protection of those in those areas, but it could mean that some of the trees on the buildable parts of the lots could be taken out for the development, but along the creek, those trees, and those are largely going to stay. Looks like Tom had his hand raised again. I don't know if it was taken down.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask Tom to unmute.
You got me?
Yep.
Okay, so Kent Kangley, 272nd, with that redevelopment right there, they're putting a pedestrian tunnel underneath that specifically for a trail. So I think anything that can be done to enhance that trail along Jenkins Creek would be an excellent idea.
Yes.
They also have several grant requests into the state for trails from Jenkins Creek Park to connect to the Soto Park.
Yeah, so if you can see my scroller, I think that connection is down here. And Soco Park is actually about right here. And those other improvements are up here, I think. All right. I think we'll keep going. 272nd, continuing to, too far. Continuing to encourage transition to pedestrian development, and very strong results here. So 89% positive. And so I think we'll just keep going unless there's any comments. I don't see any raised hands.
Yeah, I don't think we had any specific questions about the shopping center, although if anyone thinks I missed something, feel free to retype it or ask it verbally.
Okay, and I'm going to cut ahead straight to the urban town center concept here. Let's see, question, here we go. All right, so this is number, I need to go back one. Okay, here we go. Town center concept 1 with more of the private development. So, okay, we got 37% gave it a very strong rating, and 22% gave it a 4. So we got almost 60% positive there, 20% neutral, and looks like we got 20% gave it a negative score. My guess is maybe they like concept 2 better. I imagine we have some comments on this. I don't see any hands raised, but it'd be good to hear any comments on this. And
We had one related question about how long will it take for the city to purchase the property? I believe the city already has an option, or actually does own the school site already. Is that correct, staff?
Yes, the city of Covington has purchased half of the site. So the actual part where you see the school buildings on is currently owned by the city. And the building itself will be demolished in the near future.
All right. A question here about the town center, 2 options. Do any of these concepts help to develop more of a nightlife environment?
yes, I will say, so I showed you, in fact, I guess I could scroll back to the examples. Let me see here. So, well, a lot of this depends ultimately if this is a public-private partnership. In fact, let me get my results out of the way so I can see the pictures. So some of this depends, and it takes a while. The city can try to do things to actively recruit good pedestrian-friendly uses in these spaces. And since the city owns it, the city has a little more power than this was strictly a private development. So, the one on the right, the Newcastle version, it's got the ground level spaces, but it usually takes a while. There's a lag before the commercial spaces open up, and you're kind of waiting for the market to catch up a little bit.
Okay, great. Oh,
I think
sorry.
the
I think I interrupted you.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
Yeah, a couple other questions here. I'm going to combine a couple. Is there known to be interest in a hotel operator in Covington? And also, is there interest in performing arts complex facilities?
Staff, I'll let that to staff to comment on.
This is Anne. I'm not personally aware of that. We know that there's a need for a hotel in the Covington area, but I am not personally aware of it. I've heard developers are looking and talking, but that's not something I'm part of.
Like this would be a good location, that's for sure.
Yeah, and likewise, I'm not aware of any specific cultural or arts complex proposals, but that did come up a lot in our initial stakeholder interviews. There's a need for some cultural and events type space.
The Lake Point development does include a plan for a hotel, but of course that is a concept between the hotel operator and of course the Lake Point property development.
Thank you. So given the city has this option for the property, that's a great opportunity to really actively try to get those types of facilities. It's a little harder, but it gives us certainly a lot more leverage and capabilities on that side. Anything else, Scott?
In the Civic campus option, or I suppose either of the town center options, I should say, how much of the housing could be created as affordable versus private market rate development?
That is a good question. And that's something, again, since the city has some control with this, that you could make if you wanted to make a more strict requirement and have more affordable housing, that's something that you could probably go for. I will say that a lot of the new housing, or almost all of the new housing in downtown is affordable already. And in fact, we heard from a number of the stakeholders we talked about is there's a desire to get really a greater mixture of things. I don't know if staff wants to expand on that, or if you think my comments covered it.
I think they covered it, but what I've seen from our existing condition analysis is that housing in the downtown is pretty much affordable as it is. And what we want to look at for and hopefully encourage is a wider mix of housing types. It's not just apartments, but condos, townhomes, other duplexes. So that's what we're going to see if there's something we can encourage that type of housing types.
Thank you.
Question for staff, is this site where the police station will be located?
Okay, that one right there.
I think they're referring to
Yeah.
the school site in general.
Okay, someone step in if I miss answering this. Our police department is planning to temporarily locate in 2 of the temporary buildings that were on that site. And they'll remain there, and they're going to do some improvements so they can occupy it. And they'll remain there until we the city, the community, decide what we're going to put on that site. And if it's a city hall, it'll likely have a police station there as well. But the police are expected to be there in the next few months, occupying it after they do some improvements to change the use there. Does that answer the question, you think?
I think it does. Thanks. I think last question on this section, which is probably my favorite question, is which of the 2 designs best suits itself for fireworks shows?
It seems like the one that's more open would.
I think that might be referring to a little brush fire that happened in that area.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully that didn't go too far. Saw that on the news. Okay, well, why don't we see what happened with concept 2 scores?
I think we already pulled these up.
Oh, 2. Okay, I didn't see that. So 40% gave it a 5, with not too much of a surprise. But it interesting here. So we got, let's see, about 60% gave it 4 or 5, a bunch of neutrals, and a quarter gave it a 1 or 2. So it looks like what I'm guessing is maybe those 1/4 folks might have liked the other concept more, or maybe not. So any other comments on this concept?
Yeah, maybe a question for staff. Are there plans for an elementary, middle, or high school?
In the town center?
It doesn't say
Or
specifically,
downtown?
but yeah, I'm guessing the town
So
center.
so they relocated Covington Elementary School to another location within the city, and I think it's been open for like 2 or 3 years, so that there's a replacement school already, but there's no plan currently, and that's Kent School District. As far as I'm aware, their long-range plans do not show any development of a high school in the town center downtown. I don't think they would have sold the site if that was. So no, I would say unlikely.
All right.
Are we good?
Any other written or verbal questions, comments on the 2 town centers options? Ideas? All right, let's go and move on.
Okay, multifamily open space. Okay, as kind of expected here, it looks like almost half gave it a 5, and 73% for a 5. Just a few handful there gave it a bad score. So, okay, I think we got pretty solid support there to keep going. Any comments? And folks, don't be shy to speak up if people want to chime in.
I think we're good.
Okay. Getting down to the last 2 here. So building scale and massing. How'd we do here, Scott? Okay, about a third gave it a 5, a third gave it a 4, and a fifth gave it a neutral. So again, pretty strong results. Any comments on this one?
We had a question on these questions, number question number 10, 11, and 12, would these kind of extra requirements drive up costs for development?
Would they drive up cost? I don't believe they would, especially over this now, because as I mentioned, they purposely try to allow for the number of options that you could do to meet the standards. And they don't necessarily require modulation of the building, of the walls. I mean, there's other things we've found that there's many ways that you can, break down and articulate buildings and add interest. And so just over the years, I think a lot of it's just smart design. We're allowing efficient, lower cost materials, just smartly done. So I think in general, I don't believe it would add cost over what, the property values are kind of supporting. We're just trying to make sure that the design is responsive. And so that's how I respond to that. But it's something that we're definitely sensitive to, and we purposely, we don't want to do codes that are too expensive for the area and unworkable. Anything else, Scott?
No, you can go ahead and move on to the next one.
Okay, and then the last one was facade materials, conditions for the use of synthetic stucco, metal, concrete block, and cement board hardy panels. So again, this is almost the same score, almost half gave it a 5, almost a third gave it a 4. So super strong support, about 10% negative there. So again, I think, again, allowing for these materials, but just some basic conditions and parameters to ensure that, these projects they're going to be here for a long time. So it's good to get these standards in right and make sure that the buildings are articulated and they add kind of a sense of depth and richness and contribute to the overall character. Because when each building goes in, it impacts what's around it. And, it might encourage or discourage things that happen next door. So any comments on this?
Yes. One question is, are awnings considered part of these materials?
Not of these.
Yeah, I would say awnings are going to certainly be addressed in the block frontage standards. We often will provide standards for the shape and size of weather protection features over commercial uses.
Yeah, and adding to that, I would say that, if you're going to do a storefront right on the sidewalk, again, we're going to require, about 3/4 of your frontage will be required to have about a 5 or 6 foot weather protection feature, which could be a marquee. In fact, you can see in the building by the pedestrian there part of it has a weather protection, has an overhang, or it could be an awning. As far as the design of that, we often don't get into it except for when you do awnings that are signs. And so, we'll be looking at the sign code overlay. And so, oftentimes we wouldn't allow a awning that's an entirely backlit sign. So in a downtown environment, we would usually not allow that kind of a thing in a downtown area. Hopefully that answers the question. Any other comments?
Not in this section. There's a few.
Okay.
Maybe it would be jumping back a little bit. It's asking about the roundabout improvements north of 272nd. The question is there going to be a parking garage in that area to visit the storefronts, because there's very little parking in that area?
Well, that depends on the private development there. And if they're developing greater intensity, there's a decent chance that there would be. I would say right now, if it's serving commercial, probably not. That parking garage, maybe, you might have some structured parking for the apartments, but I would probably guess that from a commercial real estate standpoint, that we're not at the point where we can support a parking garage for commercial uses. That's, you know, the land values have to be probably quite a bit higher before we get there, that level.
All right, thank you. I have a question for staff. What are plans for the area of Girard Resources and the Rainier Wood areas? If Girard Resources and Rainier Woods, are those known areas to staff?
That would be the area on the southwest side of Covington Way, which is currently, I believe, some small commercial properties and a large lot of unused land that's used for a landscaping and material company.
Oh, okay. So I think we're talking about the, I think it's zone general commercial.
I believe so.
On the
It
west
might
side.
actually be, it's either zone general commercial or industrial.
Gotcha.
I think it's general commercial. In fact, I think we don't have industrial anymore.
Yeah, we do. The BPA site is. I can look up what's going on in our, we have an, while we're on this, we do have an interactive development map in the city, and there's a quick link from our, the front page of our city website. And I will look up, I'm not a current planner, so I will go check what's going on there.
Well, you can see the zoning. I got a small version of the zoning map up now.
Yes, if you look directly south of that, the 18 on the lower, on the left, lower left-hand side, that is the area in question, that large pink blob.
Or this.
No, lower
Other side.
left of Covington Way. There you go.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, it's not coming up fast enough, but I would encourage the person that asked that question to reach out to our permit services group and or go onto the Covington website and look at the interactive development map that you can zoom in to those properties and it tells you what the active permits are on that and what the plans are.
I believe the only, we on the plan development map that's somewhere here in the introduction, there is a, I believe it's a small office building and some RV boat storage is proposed in the area. That's all I'm aware of at the moment.
There's a mix of different uses there and some projects in different stages. So I think Anne made the right suggestion. What we would suggest is reach out to our current planner, Brian, and he will be able to give you all the details on each of the different projects. It's a little complex to go into all the different sites and different users and what have you, but we have all the information and we'll be happy to give you that detail in detail via email or on the phone.
Okay, any other comments or questions before we try to wrap up?
A question about the estimated timeline for purchasing homes in the developments, for instance, Covington Firs. So I think that's going back to the MHO discussion and
Yeah,
your assessment of that, Bob.
good question. And so the city most likely would not be doing any purchasing. So it would all be private if it happens. So, you know, if you're, what I would say, if there's a light rail station proposed here, you might have developers trying to contact the owners and trying to gobble up those parcels and buy people out. But I don't see that happening here. So it's pretty much one of those things. It's up to the property owners, and but I don't see the city actively do anything like that.
I think you're right, Bob. I think there's no plan by the city to purchase properties there. The current zoning there allows single families homes to remain. And then it does allow for it. I'm going to give you a general answer, but if there was an opportunity to assemble 9 or 10 lots together, there could be some office type and low density housing allowed to be developed there. And it's pretty much limited to the smaller scale, 5,000 square feet, multi-story, but not, I think only 1 or 2, 3 stories. So that's what's going on there now. what could happen and has been allowed to happen for the last 10 years.
Thank you. Question about parking, and I assume this is about street parking. Will parking continue to remain free? And I'm assuming timed once the downtown concept is solidified. I think that's more of a long-term question about operations, and that depends on whether it's public works or a private developer that is managing the street in the town center area.
Yeah, maybe if you do one of those intensive developments, if you do the concept one and develop, you have a lot of 5-story buildings there and storefronts. Those would be things you'd think about. I can't imagine you would jump right away to paid parking there. My guess is that that's probably way down the road here, but you know, things sometimes change rapidly, as we all know.
One of the things we are hoping, though, is that when people come to the downtown is that they park once and then they want to walk. I know it's not always realistic to expect people to do that, but to think, oh, if I walk north, I'm going to be able to walk on this cool trail with art or active activity. So in the ideal world, you don't need to keep driving from point to point, but you'll want to park and walk. And then the other thing is, we showed the earlier plans of trails. We want to sort of make sure that we're connecting to future trails and bike paths that go out into the city and could actually connect along SR 18 and go up Sue's Creek and up to the Lake Point development. So we're looking at, sort of a circulation plan to maybe get people to walk more and bike more. And we acknowledge they will always drive, but trying to encourage healthy behaviors.
Thanks, Anne. Can we contrast this vision and direction with Lake Point?
I would let staff tackle this one.
Jen, unless you want me to, we have a comprehensive plan, and the council was really clear when we updated it in 2016 that these would both be commercial centers. The vision has always been that the downtown is the heart of Covington. And this is actually one of the reasons we want to do this, is that we want to make sure that with all the focus and development interest in Lake Point, that we're not, forgetting downtown. We want to make sure that we're doing sort of a checkup on downtown to make sure what we did, what course corrections do we need to do. So we envision this continuing to be a commercial hub, but so will Lake Point. What downtown seems to me to have, and what our existing conditions reports are supporting in market analysis, is that the hospitals are here, and that draws a certain type of development. It draws doctors' offices, dentist offices, types of memory care, senior housing. So we need to play off of that, but also make sure we have a mix too. So, and that's what we're looking at. And we want to make sure we get development here that is well designed and high quality, but also supports all aspects of our community.
All right, good summary. I saw someone had a raised hand, but then they put it down. Again, folks are welcome to ask questions verbally. Just need to click that raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom interface. All right, go back to some of our typed comments here. We had a question about options to vote. Again, after this meeting is concluded, we'll have the same survey questions and the slideshow posted on the city's project page. So folks who couldn't attend the meeting tonight will be able to have the same opportunity for feedback.
Yeah, and on that note, I believe that we're trying to have this recorded on the website. So there'll be a couple ways people can access it. If they have the time to do the full recording, or they can look at the slideshow. The other thing that we're going to work on is a reduced slides. We're going to try to do a pared down version of the slideshow that's a little more welcoming. And Scott's going to be helping get the survey on the website by tomorrow, I believe, right?
Yes.
I'm
A lot of the material presented tonight is very aspirational. How much could be reality in the next 10 years, 20 years, etc.?
I'll take a stab at that first. We showed all those images of the new development that had been happening in the past 10 years, and it's quite a bit. I mean, I'm surprised that there's couple five-story buildings in the ground now and being proposed. So there's a clear demand and need, particularly for housing. So, but these things, they take a long time, you know, and especially the town center concept. You initially planned for it 10 years ago. I will say that, like that Juanita vision, they did that, and it took kind of about 10 years for the property owners to organize, and then another few years to get it going. But ultimately, it was in the ground 15 years after the plan was done and implemented. And same thing for like Mill Creek, you know, the Woodinville concept. It took them a long time to get a good project there. And there's some, you know, political instability with council there that might have led something to it. But, you know, I think you've got a lot of good examples to build off of now. Maybe it's a good thing that it's taken a little longer. Let the market evolve a little bit. And maybe the project is better because of it. So I would say, you know, 10 years, you're going to gradually see some incremental development here, depending on the properties. And it might be a little longer for some of the shopping centers. You know, I would say if some of your bigger centers lose their anchors early, that's going to push them probably to redevelop sooner. And if it's the commercial, you know, they might just reconfigure the single story stuff. But maybe you're getting to the point where, you know, if they're mostly vacant, that they might find it more profitable to tear it down and build apartments with some mixed use. I mean, things are evolving pretty quickly. If anybody wants to add anything there, and I don't know if Lisa or staff want to supplement my comments there.
Bob, I think you hit it well. I think the downtown estimates of growth in the comp plan for housing have largely been met, and there's room for additional housing. And the city has grown pretty consistently with jobs, even through the last recession. So I think I think what you're saying though, 10 years makes sense if you think about Bothell downtown, Kenmore downtown,
Yes.
and Kent Station. You know, things take a little while for the big elements to happen, but 10 years goes by pretty quick, it seems like.
Yeah, thanks.
Can staff elaborate on the SoCo Park timeline?
Our park planner is listening, but he is not, I think he's listening. His name is Matt, and he would be happy to talk with you about more information. Do you see him on the list anymore, guys? Oh yeah, he is. Can someone promote him and he can answer? It's Matthew Kehoe. I can approach. Okay, let me see if he will do this. Matt, are you there?
I am here.
Okay, can you answer that? Can you give us some information about the SoCo Park that was in the timeline, if you know it, if there is one?
Right, so just on the west side of Wax Road, across the street from Covington Elementary School, people might be already familiar with the fact that we acquired about 2 acres of property there in the last few years. But we've been successful in our grant applications to be able to acquire additional property and to actually have set aside now in our ownership about 4.5 acres. So we own it and we're maintaining it kind of as a passive open space while we also prepare to demolish 2 existing single family homes. We went through a public process, obviously, to buy those, pay fair market value, and to do relocation. So sometimes that can be a little controversial, but it was critical, I think, to the city to be able to be proactive along Jenkins Creek, to give one of the first access points to the creek, and to start setting up green space as part of downtown, downtowns, it's not my place to give you the success key, but one thing I would favor is the green space and the natural elements and sometimes the softening of the higher densities. And some human-friendly spaces, as already referenced. So I heard about the time frame. The thing is it's always a game, not a game, but a challenge to find development dollars. And typically we rely on getting competitive with partnerships and ultimately grants. So we would be looking at developing a rather passive park, but ideally one that would complement downtown, probably with overlooks to the creek, certainly trails and picnic facilities. I don't know that you would ever see any large parking or any kind of significant infrastructure, mostly because of the wetland buffer there. But there isn't a time frame for development. There is just some aspirations and a conceptual plan of things that could happen on those 6 acres.
And I'll just butt in that there's, as Matt commented on, there are environmental constraints from the wetlands, and that Jenkins Creek happens to be one of our shorelines of the state, and it has a little bit extra protections on it. And we do want a trail, and we are acquiring easements as development happens on the east side of Wax Road that abuts Jenkins Creek, so that we can connect from Covington Way north to southeast 272nd someday and go through there. So we're planning for it. We're just, like you said, we have to find the money.
All right, thank you, Matt and Ann. I think that's the end of our questions, Bob. We had one about what are the next steps for this project, which is great because we have a few slides wrapping up with that.
Yeah, we're right on time, and bear with me. I'm getting back to those slides here. Almost there. Okay, I think we did that. Okay. So again, the project website has got a lot of good information there, and we'll also have the next steps. And we encourage folks to include their email so we can give them updates. Again, this is going to be recorded. I think I already mentioned all of these things before. Survey on the webpage. And so the next steps, we're going to take the results of this. In fact, what we'll do is we'll have these survey numbers, which are great, and you've all much exceeded my expectations for the number of folks chiming in on the survey. So this is really, really great. So we'll soon have survey results on the website, and we're going to use this to begin drafting the code. And so you can see here, we don't have set dates yet for the next steps. Like I said, this was many months ago, we put together this chart, and we're a little bit behind because of COVID-19 impacts, but we probably have around the holiday having a first draft of the code. And that probably means that it might not be a public presentation of that until January, because you know how messy the holidays get for trying to do public meetings and presentations. But we'll be working on that, and we'll try to keep the Planning Commission tuned in. And then, of course, after that, it'll be a matter of refining it and getting into the adoption phase. Does Ann or Jenna or Ryan want to interject any other comments there?
This is Ann. I just wanted to encourage you to sign up for the email list so that you can be informed of information that's put on the website that you might be interested in, a summary of this meeting. We will be issuing a draft EIS that looks at the impacts of sort of the different things we're considering there. And you'll be able to see that there and comment on it. And then you'll know when it goes to the Planning Commission when we have upcoming public meetings or public hearings. So it's a good way of finding out how to keep in touch, and we'll keep you informed about what's going on. But I'll pass it. Thank you very much to Makers and Burke tonight for your presentation. And if you do have any questions, my name is Ann Mueller, and you can email me at amueller, which is AMUELLER @covingtonwa.gov. So anyway, thank you.